Good afternoon and welcome back to the Saanich North and the Islands Constituency Office. We had a week off. We shot the last Public Circle Live down in the legislature. We are now back in our office here in beautiful Sidney by the Sea. This is the Public Circle Live. It's our weekly show where Aldous and I get together and chat about the week that was in BC politics. The Public Circle Live is our show. The Public Circle is the public engagement and outreach arm of the work that we do in our riding.
Yeah, and I would like to say that it's episode 14.
And today is, what's the date today?
May 18th.
May 18th. So we've done this for 14 straight weeks. Actually, we missed 1 week. But other than that, we've been doing this show now, and we've been talking about the issues, and we've been making ourselves available to answer questions. This is Aldous Spurl. He runs this amazing constituency operation here in our riding. And if you want to get a hold of us, you can see all of the contact details below. Please show us some love. Hit the like button a few times. And if you're watching a rebroadcast of this, please share this video. We want to make sure that people have a chance to see it.
Absolutely.
What are we talking about this week?
Well, Adam, it's been a busy week. You know, you've talked a lot this week, and you've been involved in the community quite a bit.
It's true.
So every day you spoke on either cannabis, climate accountability, funding TransLink, and this is in the BC legislature, so nice speeches. I watched all of them. You also spoke on the need for BC to support British Columbia colleges, like other provinces are doing, and as well as supporting Salt Spring business initiatives. So that was a ton of videos, and I'm sure Ryan can post a number of them as we come to them. But in the community, you also spoke to the Central Saanich Community Association, and we hosted a community dialogue last night on Kinder Morgan. Maybe we'll touch briefly on both those things for a second.
Okay. Yeah, so it was one of those weeks in the legislature. It was kind of a defining week, I think, for me as an MLA. It's taken a while, frankly. It's a intimidating place. When you're one of only a few hundred people that have ever signed that register to be an MLA, that's an honor in and of itself. But over the past number of weeks, I've really, because I've been the critic for so many bills, and I can't even remember exactly how many.
You're the critic for 7 ministries, I believe.
7 ministries, but those ministries are doing work, right? Mm-hmm. And so, as the bills come forward, I have to be able to read the bill. We have staff that read the bill, that produce briefing notes, and then I have the responsibility to stand up in the legislature and speak to those bills and the things that we find that we like, the things that perhaps need a little bit of work, or just very generally our philosophical approach, how it is the same or differs with government. And so the past week has been a defining week for me in the sense that the time has been tight, and I much less prepared speeches, much more from the notes, which is what my preference has always been. But I've certainly been I enjoyed this week.
Now, a lot about what we do in this office and a lot about what you do is bringing that back to the community. So you spoke to the Central Saanich Community Association this week, as well as we had a dialogue here on Kinder Morgan. Mm-hmm. What were the highlights for you of that community association meeting?
I always love the opportunity to sit and have a conversation with people in the community about what it is that we do, to answer any questions that we might have. You never know what the issues or the opportunities are that are going to be laid out. And so for me, we talked about lots about the provincial issues that are there, whether it be Kinder Morgan, the issues around Site C, but then as well we talked about local government and my role as the critic, community affairs, municipal affairs, and housing. I'm just trying to think back as to what else we talked about. It was an amazing conversation. We sat in a circle and had a good discussion. People asked questions about the government. I gave them the best I could from an inside view of it. And so I always love those conversations, and any of the other community associations in our riding that want to have those,
or any community organization.
Sure, why not?
We're here to answer questions. So if you would like Adam to come speak, just get a hold of us, and we'll do what we can to arrange that. Awesome. I want to focus on a few things that happened this week. First of all, this report. This is a wild salmon report that we put out, or the BC Green Caucus put out. You announced it on Wednesday. It's available on our website for anyone who wants to read it. What was your hope in the work that you did here, and what do you think is going to come out of it?
So first of all, I want to thank my colleague in the legislative office, Claire. she's probably one of the most modest people I've ever met in my entire life, but the content of that, the way it's been articulated, is her work. Mm-hmm. And it really summarizes the work that I and my colleagues did, the public-facing part of our team, the work that we did in the legislature over the past number of months on salmon. As Evan, our chief of staff, said, up until the week before last, we didn't go more than 2 days in the legislature without saying something about wild salmon, without talking about fish farms, without talking about wild salmon policy. And it for me, it was a real learning experience. And when you focus on an issue and you put a fine focus on something, the quality of work that can be done. And so, it was a really inspirational time for me, and especially dealing with the issue of wild salmon. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. Anybody who's watched the Public Circle knows we talk about it often. This is the culmination of that work. And we've got the camera on facing us, so it's going to look like it's backwards. But you can find that on my website at adamolsen.ca. It's right up at the very front page of the website. Go check out the work that we did. I think that what you'll see is how a party in opposition can be effective in highlighting an issue. When we decide to focus on something, we decide to do good work, when we bring people together and build community, what you'll find is that that it doesn't matter whether you are in government or in opposition. When you have the honor of being in that legislature, then you have a responsibility to do work. And I think that this report highlights good work that we did as a caucus team, the support from the constituency staff. It was a good team effort.
And I'd also like to say something that's very unique about this report that should be highlighted is the number of stakeholders that were in agreement that action needs to happen now.
Yeah, and you know what? Look, I've been in the legislature now for a year, less than that actually. But we got elected a year ago. I don't make no bones about the fact that I'm very, very new to this. There are people that have been working in the creeks and streams, that have been commercial fishermen, that have been fisher people that have been sport fishing for decades, that have really had their sleeves rolled up for a lot longer on this issue than I have. I come by this issue around salmon. Honestly, my family's long time in the fishing industry. But you know what? Like, look, those people who have been working in this for their lifetime deserve a heck of a lot more credit in keeping this front and center than I do. But I have a certain role, and that role has been to bring this issue to government and to not let my foot off the pedal, to make sure that they continue to know that this is one of the most important natural resources. In fact, one of the most important natural resources that we have in this province. Good salmon policy is good economic, social, and environmental policy. And so we brought together a lot of people, and I can tell you, and it was no offense intended to those that didn't participate in this report. Those who have love for our fish, your spirit is in this, and we look forward to continuing to work with everybody who's in the salmon fishing, the fishing industry, our oceans, and so it is the culmination of a lot of hard work of a lot of people. Some who informed us of this, some who didn't directly inform us but inspired us by this, and so I'm thankful for everyone who participated. I think 15 groups came together to form this, or something along that. Anyway,
yeah, a lot of input. It's good. Mm-hmm. We had, I think, 700 emails come in this week about one topic.
What?
Cannabis.
Weed.
People
the cannabis.
Care. So, can you give us maybe a bit of an overview, quick recap about the central changes that are happening, some of your concerns, and we'll just sort of piece through that a bit.
The central change that's happening is that cannabis in Canada is being legalized by the federal government. And that has been something that's, I think the bill there, Bill 60-something, anyway, the bill there has been locked up in the House of Commons, and now I think it's in the Senate. And so the provincial government has to act on that, and we have to then regulate it in the province. And so we had 3 pieces of legislation that came forward in this session that have now got royal assent. One was a bill on an amendment bill of the Motor Vehicle Act, which basically, admittedly, we don't have any way to test cannabis, test for THC in the blood like we do for alcohol. And so this is something that I think is one that we need to be very, very cognizant of, that we've got a lot of work to do as we legalize cannabis. Driving while under the influence is not something that we should, that we support in any way. But we also need to be making sure that we give our police officers the tools in order to be able to make sure that we can test. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that. Another bill that we did was Bill 30, which was the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act. This is the bill that basically puts the provincial structure in place to ensure that we comply with the new federal rules, which allow for the recreational use of cannabis. And then Bill 31, which was a bill around the distribution of that. So the first bill does the licensing and the control of the substance, and then the second bill sets up the distribution network for it.
So if Joe, the consumer, would like to buy some cannabis in the near future, how is that going to work? Is he going to be able to go down to his friend and buy, or does he have to go to a central government spot? Where are we going with this distribution? No,
I think the system that you outlined, going to his friend and buying, that's the system that's currently in place.
The illegal system.
This is the one that is being changed. No, the provincial government is creating very much like the liquor distribution branch does for liquor in the province. In fact, it's I would say it's parallel, but it's not really. The liquor distribution branch is the branch that's dealing with it. Although liquor distribution branch is now kind of a misleading name. So, but anyways, it's also the control and does the licensing. We set up a general manager and a director that manages the product, and it's going to be able to license. It's going to be licensing the retail distribution of it. It's important to point out that the federal government continues to maintain control over the licensing of the producers. So those who want to grow cannabis to large scale or even down to a micro scale, the federal government's still responsible for the production of it. So we basically have set up in the province a centralized location for cannabis to be collected and then distributed to the retail outlets where it can be then sold to the consumers. And we've heard in those 700 emails, none of them were like, "This is perfect."
No, that's true.
Actually, like 100% of those 700 emails were not. That was not the case. But what I think, and I met with a lot of groups over time, is that I've heard two things. One thing I heard was that it didn't go far enough. It should go further. It should be more strict. And that's frankly what we heard from the BC Liberals. They continue to take a kind of a war on drugs approach to this. We've seen that not work. There's a reason why cannabis is being legalized. I can't figure out why the official opposition, the BC Liberals, are taking the approach on this that they're taking, but that was their choice. And the other message that we heard was, you've gone too far. So, it should be more accessible to the public or less regulations. And so, as I said in my speech, and I think that Laura's linked it, the speech to Bill 30, is that when you hear, about the similar number of emails coming in from, or similar number of messages coming to you that, you've gone too far or you haven't gone far enough, that, in this kind of situation, you've probably struck a balance. That said, there's going to be some amendments, probably some amendments from me on this in the near future, or
And to those who are listening, I mean, one of those main concerns that came in was the idea of craft cannabis, small-scale producers, them being able to sell their product just like we do with craft beer and craft alcohol. Speak to that for a second, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the rules that has been set up is that basically, if you're a producer, you have to sell it to the centralized distribution hub. Then they distribute it to the retailers. What we have for craft beer, craft spirits in this province is we've got it so that you can actually produce, and if you're a small scale producer, if you're a small winery or a small cidery or a small brewery, you can sell your product. There's a storefront there. Perhaps that's something that we should be looking at for the craft cannabis industry as well. I would just say this: from my perspective, I think that we need to get this system in place. We need to understand how it works. We need to see if it is working. We need to fix the things that aren't working. And my belief is that there's an awful lot of, despite this being illegal, there's quite a lot of experience in our province, and I think that everybody in our province knows that, in growing cannabis. Yeah. Like, part of the reason why we're legalizing it is because when you have a large percentage of your citizens actively flouting the law because they don't believe, like, part of this is because society has evolved to the point where cannabis production, cannabis consumption, recreational, the government looking at it and says, people are doing it anyways. I mean, like 420 in Vancouver, you got thousands of people just in a public park smoking weed, and it's like the public officials going, what do we, like, what? So I think society has moved along. It's evolved. Perhaps British Columbia is further along than other parts of the province are. I think that we'll take a look at how this works, what's not working, and part of our job as legislators is to recognize areas that need to be improved and then get on with improving them.
Again, for anyone who's interested or concerned, you can check out all of Adam, your statements on our website. Yeah. And for those who want to actually look into what exactly the legislation says, check out Hansard. It's the where you can find out all the bills and what they say.
So I'm like, people aren't commenting like they normally do. Yeah. Please give us a comment. If you're wondering what I'm doing down here, I'm looking at the computer. I do want to note Pritpal Singh Sekhan, and I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, Pritpal. I get a lot of messages about farmland, about housing speculation, about the housing policies. I want to acknowledge the comments and the emails and the Facebook messages that you send, and I want to talk about, actually, if we could very quickly, about some news stories that I was in around house sizes on the ALR. Sure. Yeah. And you'll be able to check out on my website a video that I did, or at least on Facebook, a video that I did thanking Frank Leonard for his work as the ALC chair, and then encouraging the government. And I've talked to the minister since, and Minister Lana Popham since then, encouraging the government to just regulate the size of houses and to just regulate the location of houses on farmland, just to get on with it. We don't need any more consultation. We know that this increases the speculation of agricultural land for some other purpose, just increases the cost of that land. The former chair, Frank Leonard, said change it. To the Liberals, said change it. To the NDP, neither government's changed it. Now I'm saying we got to get on with it.
And to those who don't understand the issue, we're talking about mega mansions on small farmlands, essentially.
That's correct, yeah.
Big problem in the Lower Mainland at the moment.
Big problem in Saanich North and the Islands.
Yep, that too. Yeah. Okay, so then there's a very historic thing that happened this week, at least historic for those of us who are political nerds, and that is...
Nerds?
Nerds. No, yeah, I get nervous when I'm in front of this camera. Okay.
Do I ever point out when you mispronounce words?
Well, I could say that you mispronounced province and country. St. BC was the only province in this province earlier in the show, but I won't go there.
Point it out. Well, come on.
Let it slide.
I don't.
Anyway.
I don't ever let it slide.
Well, fair enough.
Do I?
Sometimes. Okay.
I never do.
But what happened was that Andrew Weaver, leader of the BC Greens...
Who's that?
...introduced a private member's bill that, for the first time that I'm aware of, made it to second reading. Normally, private members' bills, they get to the floor, you get a chance to talk about what you'd like to do, and then it dies. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't become law.
Well, they don't even call it. Yeah. Most of the time, they don't even call it. I had a private member's bill that's still sitting there or something.
Well, exactly. It dies till the next session, and then you have to restart, sort of thing. But this time, Andrew's private member's bill made it to second reading. Mm-hmm. And it was a bill on benefit corporations, or allowing the ability for benefit corporations to exist in the province. You want to speak to that for a second?
Yeah, so basically a benefit, or B Corp, a benefit corporation, is to allow companies to establish the triple bottom line values right within their constitution, or right within, like, enshrine it within the business. A lot of people who set up B Corps, and Andrew listed off a bunch of them. I can't. Anyway, they'll come back to me. But basically, we enshrine within the essence of the business, this triple bottom line, environmental, social, and economic values into the business. And people who set these B Corps up, you know, so that they're giving back and not taking more than they, you know, so that they're operating on the triple bottom line kind of principles, are worried that if, you know, the board changes over, or if it's a new CEO that comes in, that those values will change. And so what a B Corp allows is it's a change to the Corporations Act. I believe it's, anyways, one of those acts. And what it does is it allows for a company in its establishment, or even as it evolves over time, to enshrine that, so that, you know, that is the basis of the company, and that it can't change over time with the changing, you know, as people changes and leadership changes.
And it's important because for so long we've been corporations have had one motive, and that is profit. And basically, as a society, we need to encourage the adoption of other motives, giving back, having triple bottom line. And I should say over 30 states in the U.S. already have this legislation. Correct. So it's not like we're leading the pack here with something innovative. We're just
in Canada up. We are. In Canada we are. Well, we would be the first enough. In Canada. In Canada we are. And I do want to actually, the legislation is good legislation. And again, I think it highlights the sophistication of our group, of the BC Green Caucus. What we're learning as we go here, you know, none of this is just handed. Oh, you know, here's the book, here's the playbook, this is how you do it. Mm-hmm. You know, so Aldous said that it's not very often that a private member's bill will get called. Never mind get to second reading. 0. That's right. So how do you work around that? How can you be successful knowing that the government just simply won't call your private member's bill? Well, you do something. First of all, I think that you have to take a look at the kind of issues that you bring forward, how you're bringing them forward. You bring forward an issue that is, you know, that British Columbians are passionate about, or you bring forward an issue that the government is passionate about, but they haven't done anything about. You search for common ground between all three parties in the legislature, and you then work on legislation that is, you know, founded on that. So oftentimes what happens in that legislature is 2 parties or 3 parties at war with each other. And I think it's when you are at peace with each other that you can start to find the common ground and figure out, okay, where can we be effective? And this Andrew is brilliant in the fact that he's found a place that why would you vote against this? Like, I haven't yet, you know, we've talked about it. We talked about it in our caucus, and literally I can't find a reason why anybody would go, no, that's a stupid idea. Why would you possibly want, you know, and why would you get in the way of somebody who wants to do, you know, if somebody wants to set up a business that has triple bottom line, yes, thank you, Judy. Hootsuite, Natural Products are examples of B Corp. Ben & Jerry's, thanks Charles Bateman, absolutely. The names were escaping me. Patagonia, I think, is another one. Anyway, so this is the example of legislation in which there should be 87 MLA standing up and saying this is something that we should be getting behind and supporting. And I think that there are lots of areas in our province and in our society where there's broad agreement, and that, you know, it might not be working properly. So let's fix it. Let's make it work properly. And that's the work that Andrew's done here, and he deserves a lot of credit for it. And I think that the government deserves a lot of credit for calling it to second reading and putting up 2 cabinet ministers. This happened yesterday. They put up 2 cabinet ministers to speak on this issue and to treat Andrew's private members' legislation like we treat their government legislation. They said, this looks like a great idea. We really are supportive of these kinds of things. We're going to take a look at the bill in detail, and there might be some questions that we have about it. You know, the tables have been flipped. And then they said something that we often say, which is, we are, you know, going to support this bill and move it forward. Another innovation about this that needs to be highlighted, and that the government does need to have some credit for, is that they've given all private members, so anybody that's not a government member, they've given them access to the legislative drafters. So Andrew's bill was not written on a napkin and brought in. Andrew's bill was written in consultation. Sarah, one of our staff member in the legislature, in consultation with the legal drafters in our province, wrote this bill so that we know that when it comes to the floor, it's going to be something that is legally sound, a legally sound document.
And I should say that that's really important because legislative drafters ensure that when you introduce a piece of legislation, it doesn't conflict with all the other legislation out there.
There's a lot of work there.
So,
yeah. And so, you know, this is something that could be used by the BC Liberals if they choose to. I could use it, Sonia. We could put pieces of legislation together and put them on the floor. And no, you know, the government might not call them, and you know, that would be, we'd have to then do work to try to get people to get the government to call them. There's many ways that we can govern more effectively than British Columbia has been governed in the past. And I think we're learning how to do that.
You know, to wrap up here today, maybe we can just talk about governing, because you have been in the legislature now for a year. You've been an MLA for a year. Second session, you had a fall session and a spring session.
Yeah.
You, Sonia, and Andrew. Well, Andrew's been there for a while, but you two are learning your roles as legislators.
He's been there forever.
Well, 5 years.
Like,
forever. You know, you're starting to speak really well in the legislature. You're giving good speeches. You're speaking off the cuff, from what I understand, and making some good points. One of the most important...
Out of necessity more than anything else.
Well, fair enough. One of the best speeches I think you gave was on Indigenous language.
Thank you.
And we had comments around the board.
Quite passionate about that.
About how powerful the speech that was. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, I really recommend you check it out. Ryan will put it in the links there.
Maybe someone will put it in the links. The other, you know what? Can I pitch my favorite speech so far? Because that was a good one. But my favorite speech, and it's one that we didn't talk about, it is the Climate Change Accountability Act, Bill 34. And the reason why, there's a couple of reasons why I am excited about the Climate Change Accountability Act. The content, of course, as a BC Green, part of the BC Green Caucus, that would be one of the reasons why I'm very excited about the change from, you know, greenhouse gas emission target, blah, 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 act to climate change accountability. And if you watch the video, you'll see me talk more about that. But this is a bill that I decided that I was going to speak to in very, very short, and it's a short bill, so I was able to do it, in a very short turnaround. It was important for me to speak to that bill. And so I read it. I then read the notes that were prepared for my colleagues. I decided to highlight certain aspects of it, and then I got up and delivered it. And very, very little in the way of lead up to it. And I think that it highlights what Aldous was saying, is that as I have become more comfortable, and as we become more comfortable, frankly, in there, part of our job is to actually debate, not just stand up and read canned written speeches, but it's actually to have let the legislature be a living, breathing thing, so that we're thinking, and not that we're just there delivering something that has been prepared by somebody else that you've read a couple of times or scanned and said, yeah, I think I said that, and do it. And so as we become more comfortable, as I become more comfortable, I look forward to the opportunity to actually do what you're supposed to do in that place, and that's debate.
Mm-hmm. And we look forward to it. There is
fired up.
Next week is a legislative break week, and we'll
happy long weekend, everybody.
Yeah,
I'll be on Galliano tomorrow.
That's right, you will be at the farmers market.
I'm stoked.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And we'll be on Salt Spring next week, and
Salt Spring.
We've got a
talking housing on Salt Spring next week. We recognize that there's still, and they're housing.
And I believe the rental housing task force that you're a part of is also planning to come in on Salt Spring.
They announced that, or did you just?
I said they're planning to.
Oh,
they're planning to. Yeah.
You announced that they're planning to?
I just did. Yeah. So keep tuned for that. We'll hope to have you updates as that comes.
So we had our first couple of meetings on the housing task force. I see we're 29 minutes and 14 seconds. You said less than 30 minutes.
Let's keep it to half an hour, yeah.
So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you want to get a hold of us, you can find out all the contact information and the links below. Telephone number, email, website. Go to the website. We've put up a ton of content. Share all this stuff with your friends, family.
If you have questions,
even your enemies.
Email us. Adam will try and get to them next week in the Public Circle Live. And I want to make two important announcements. One, next weekend. Not this coming long weekend. Next weekend, next Saturday, May 26th. What's happening?
Oh, the MLA feedback form.
Yeah.
This is your opportunity to rate me as an MLA, the office, Aldous,
What we're doing.
and as well, it gives you an opportunity to give some feedback about how you think the government's doing.
On any issue.
Like, look, we get elected, and then we spend the next 4 years assuming that we're doing a great job. And I don't think we do enough of asking people, how are we doing? Because the only time that I'm going to be able to say we need to make this change is if we get feedback that says, hey, you're doing this well, but you could be doing this, or you're not doing this very well, and you really need to start doing that. So I think for me, the only way that we're going to get better is if we get honest evaluation of the work that we're doing. That means I won't even be there for very much. I'm going to come in, introduce it, say hello, and then leave so that everybody can just know that they can give good, honest feedback about the job that we're doing, because the number one goal of our operation is to do what?
Community engagement.
And what? Improve.
Oh.
So always improve.
We do always improve. That's why we hold these.
This is proof that we're close, but he's not finishing sentences yet. So that's...
Well, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So if you can, we'd really appreciate you to come out to that. May 26th at the Presbyterian Church. You can find out more information on our website on that.
Yep.
And for all of those people who are listening on the Gulf Islands, we are doing a Gulf Island tour, town hall tour throughout the riding, second week of June. So check out our website for that.
Yeah, and in fact, it's all on the front page of the website. You don't even have to go that far. I just updated it this morning. You can see all of those 8 events that we've got coming up in the very near future on the homepage of the website, adamolsen.ca. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We will be back again with you with episode 15 next week at the same time. 4:30 on Fridays. And I might even start doing some morning hits as well. We've been talking about that, doing some Facebook Live stuff in the mornings so that we can deal with, cover some of these issues on a one-off basis. So thanks a lot for joining us. And so until next week, Hayekwa.
Hayekwa.